Welcome everyone to our final installment of Torah from Israel for Hanukkah here on this penultimate day of Hanukkah. We're so lucky to have Judy Klitsner with us. Judy is a senior lecturer at the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies, although I was lucky to first meet her in Washington, D.C., because I think you were on sabbatical the year that I was at Pardes. I've been a longtime fan, and I know you have many longtime fans in the room here. So I'll just remind people that Judy Klitsner is a biblical scholar and lectures internationally. She holds a visiting lectureship at the London School of Jewish Studies, and she's the author of Subversive Sequels in the Bible, which is a beautiful book that we have in our library. What did you say, Judy? Oh, I think I lost someone there, which received the National Jewish Book Award. Judy is a phenomenal teacher, and we are very lucky to have her here today, and I will turn it over to you.
I think that all got, I didn't hear you, but just when you were about to announce my book, you disappeared. Okay, anyway.
Oh, no, Judy's book, just in case I disappeared for everyone, I will say Judy's book is called Subversive Sequels in the Bible, How Biblical Stories Mine and Undermine Each Other. It is a book I turn to often when thinking about what I'm going to say or teach, and I often draw on the Torah I've learned from Judy. So I'm so glad to add another installment in that chapter for me and for our whole community.
Thank you so much, Rabbanit Yael, and it was lovely to hear from you after a long absence that we hadn't been in touch. And I was very moved by this initiative to create some sense of connection between Jews on two sides of the ocean. What a lovely thing to do. I think my mandate was to talk about something having to do with Hanukkah, and you said something like some of my own experiences at the moment. And so with all due caveats, I want to just say, first of all, along with the rest of the people in Israel, I'm not in a great mood lately, so this is not going to be the happiest of talks. And also the other thing I want to say is that these are obviously just my own thoughts. I don't mean to impose any of these thoughts on anybody else. It's things change from day to day, but the notion of anti-Semitism, both in relation to what happened here in Israel, the kind of hatred that we experienced on October 7th, and what we've been looking.
Has she only cut out for me, or has she cut out for everybody? Okay. I will send her. Let me send her a message.
Looks like her picture's gone now.
Uh-oh. I'm going to send her a quick WhatsApp and see if we can get her. Oh, no, she's not gone. Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. She must have lost connection for a moment. I'm sure we'll get her back momentarily. She must know by now, so I don't have to email her.
In the meantime, her book is amazing. For anyone who hasn't read it, it is astounding, the connection she makes between different stories. It's incredible.
Yeah, she speaks about sort of evolutions. If anyone heard my Shavuot shir last year, heavily based on her idea of subversive sequels, that the daughters of Lot sort of are seen again in the story of Tamar, and then seen again in the story of Ruth, that it's like sort of a refinement of a theme, maybe is how she might have said it. Super interesting ones, not all obvious at all on the surface. She really sees connection in a cool way. And we have it in the library. It's in the Beit Midrash. Anyone who would like to take a quick perusal. Anyone want to share how their Hanukkah is going while we wait for Judy Klitsner to come back? How quickly you turned your camera off, Nehemiah.
Sorry about that. I was going to say, oh, you noticed.
I'm just teasing. No one
No,
else
I know.
shares.
There's such a weird dissonance between like being happy to see people, like I haven't seen Judy in a long time, and I'm all excited, and then on the other hand, like what a difficult time. So there's such a
Yeah, definitely. Hello, she's back. How wonderful. Hello, Judy. I'm gonna pause.
So, no,
That's just me recording again.
okay, good. Anyway, what I was trying to say before we were so rudely interrupted is basically that October 7th changed, I think, it changed Jews in Israel, I think forever. And I get the sense from the friends that I speak to in the US that the same is true there. To see the kinds of horrific acts, and just hatred in its most naked, virulent, violent form. And the shattering, I was talking about this word conceptiot, these conceptions that we had. Here in Israel, I think it exploded our belief that we could reason with and even manage terrorists that are living on our borders. And I think it also sadly exploded hopes that we had that we were on a forward path toward less warfare. I was talking to my husband about this the other day, how we couldn't have imagined when we made Aliyah over 40 years ago that we had this distant hope that our children, I know my husband served in the army, but that maybe our children would serve less, and certainly our grandchildren less than that. And that has been completely upended. And I would say that compounding the difficulty here after October 7th was what we see, the reaction of the world, which I think shattered a different conceptia, which was held by a lot of Jews throughout the world, which was that anti-Semitism was kind of fringe phenomenon, that it could be managed, it could be contained. And it was really shocking that even before the ground invasion of Gaza began, there was already, where's my, oh shoot, hold on a second. I forgot about my PowerPoint. Oh, yeah, Elle, do you see this?
No, not yet. So I'm gonna make you the co-host again.
I'm sorry, I have this wonderful PowerPoint that I can't seem to.
You should be able to share it again the way you did the first time, or you could send it to me and I can share it if that would be easier, like less stressful.
Just 1 second, please.
Oh, there you go. It's working.
Wait, do you see the PowerPoint? No.
No, you see your screen, the launch Zoom website. But if you clicked on, I think then we will be able to see it. Let's see. There we go. And then just remember, hit that green arrow on the top.
Wait, but you're not seeing the PowerPoint that I am trying to.
Right. Remember, if you go to that sort of top left corner where it says from beginning on that like projector screen icon. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, we're there.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I had to show you this, right? That this is kind of the kind of resistance, basically saying that Israel was at fault for the slaughter of its own people. And we were here in Israel, we were faced with what felt like this mind-bending situation where the wanton slaughter of Jews in Israel was met with global calls to slaughter more Jews. And a lot of this was happening by those that many of us considered to be friends and allies in all kinds of good causes that we supported for years. And many people expressed this sense of profound betrayal by these former partners and allies. Right, and I just personally, I'm very involved. I'm the founding board chair of a wonderful organization based in the United States called Sacred Spaces, which is basically dedicated to preventing abuse in Jewish institutions. And it was just shocking to see that after the sexual violence, the brutal rapes of our people on that day, that all of the global forums that are out there had absolutely nothing to say about it. And in fact, they defied all, basically all the progress that we had made in making sure that there were certain standards that were followed, that you validate, you support someone who's been assaulted. Suddenly that was replaced with, we demand to have hard evidence of the things that you're saying. The burden of proof is on you. It was just really just unbelievable. And certainly I don't have to tell you what's going on in the campuses there. This was one little gem I found in a university called Wayne State University in Detroit. Is that near where you live?
It is. Mhm.
Had this strange notion that everybody on a campus is deserving of safety unless they're Jewish. It really just kind of rocked us all, and that's not even talking about the hostage situation. 240 men, women, children, babies, elderly, Holocaust survivors, the sick and the infirm, citizens over 30 countries. And nothing could shake the world into supporting Israel on this. There was no global outcry. And in fact, as you know, there are this rash of people tearing down signs that ask you to return these abducted people. Anyway, so both in Israel and abroad, we've basically been forced to look at our relationships with the world in a kind of a harsh new light. And here we are in Hanukkah, still confronting these shocking levels of Jew hatred. I saw a recent ADL poll that says that there's been a 337% rise in anti-Semitism in the United States between the dates of October 7th and December 7th of 2023. So basically, what am I doing here? The other thing that's part of my mandate here is to teach some Torah and to say something that has to do with Hanukkah. So here's what I'd like to do in the short time that we have is address some of the basics. Why the hatred? And can we point to some underlying causes of anti-Semitism? Can anti-Semitism be successfully combated? Well, just for full disclosure, I don't think I'm going to solve any of these age-old questions in the hour that we have. But I would like to just examine a couple of sources. And let's start with the holiday of Hanukkah, because actually here in Israel, it is not the penultimate day, it is the ultimate day. So in tribute to that, we are going to start with Hanukkah. What does the story of Hanukkah have to tell us about anti-Semitism? And I would say that at its core, Hanukkah, the story is about an ideological assault on the Jews. It does turn into a war for physical survival, but it starts with laws against the very identity of the Jew, right? The laws of Antiochus, as related in the book of Maccabees, no circumcision, no Sabbath observance, no sacrifices at the temple. Basically, these are laws that I think most define the unique Jewish identity, right? Brit Milah is the personal identity, the family identity, perhaps even the connection back to our ancestors, to Abraham, who was the first Jew to be circumcised. Shabbat is our daily rhythms, our communal lifestyle, and korbanot, sacrifices, are public displays of ritual. So I think what we've got here is at its core anti-Semitism, and maybe this is what Hanukkah posits. It's about the separate, unique identity of the Jew, and I think that finds great resonance in some Torah passages that I'd like to consult with you. When we meet the first Jew, we have the introduction of this idea of the unique identity, and in God's first call to Abraham, that identity is really, it lies at the core of everything. First of all, it starts with, but this is chapter 12 of Genesis. You can see it on your screen. Vayomer Hashem el Avram lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladetecha u'mibeit avicha. Famous words. The first thing is it comes from God, right? The word comes from God, and I would say that at the foundation of the relationship of the budding Jew, the future Jew, is some form of communication with God. That being a Jew fundamentally includes some kind of godly connection, some kind of spiritual awareness, connection, seeking. The first word that God speaks to Abraham is lech, right? Get going. And so we might understand from this that being Jewish somehow is about a journey. It's about being constantly in motion, seeking, growing, experiencing, learning. And together with that, we have this word lecha, which arguably is redundant. What do you need it for? What would we have lost if it simply said lech, go, but lech lecha? And there have been a lot of responses to this, but I think the simplest is there's some kind of going toward yourself. There's a distinction here that is communicated to him. Go in your own way, lecha, something that's uniquely yours. And maybe there's a suggestion here of defying conventional wisdom, of the existing ideologies, right? That the journey is going to entail uncovering more and more of Avraham for him, doing the hard work to uncover his own identity. As he moves toward God, he also moves more deeply within himself. And maybe that translates over the generations into never blindly following the assumptions or the mores of the world around us. Significantly also, we have Va'agadla Shemecha. God says, I will make your name great. God is essentially calling on Abraham to be a person of name. And I've always been very intrigued with this concept, this biblical concept of a name. And Martin Buber writes beautifully about it, where he says that a name represents strong identity. Somebody who's worthy of being on record, and that's why the Bible, and especially the book of Bereshit, is so intent on giving us names, in long lists of names in the genealogies. Basically, anybody who's on there is a person of name, is a person of worth, is a person who deserves to be on record. And I think it's not a coincidence that this person, Avraham, who is to be a person of name, descends directly from a man whose very name is name. Ele Toldot Shem. This is the genealogy that leads directly to Avraham. So he's destined, from everything we see here, he's destined to pursue this unique identity. And I think that is further supported by this kind of second name that Avraham is given, this description of Avraham as Avraham HaIvri. And I think the Midrash is right on target when it says, why is he called Ivri? This is where the word Hebrew comes from. But the Midrash says it's from the word Ever, that all the world is on one side and Avraham is on the other side. He's always separate. He's the quintessential other, but in a very positive way. And of course, the last piece that is significant in this initial call to Avraham, God says to him, where are you going? El haaretz asher ar'eka, the land is central to this emerging identity, right? The destination of this journey is that the strong personal identity will lead to a strong communal and national identity, and that will reach its fruition in the land, right? So all of this is going to be challenged, right? That's the call to Avraham. Many of these thoughts and tropes are going to be challenged in a passage. We're going to skip ahead now to the book of Shemot, the book of names, significantly. And this introduction to the book of names, I think, serves as a kind of ingenious and insidious blueprint for the anti-Semite. So if there are any anti-Semites out there, pay attention. The book of Shemot, I would say, begins auspiciously with great promise, with great ceremony. Ve'ele Shemot b'nei Yisrael. These are the names, right? They come into Egypt with their names intact. These are people of strong identity. But very quickly, the names disappear and they turn into this kind of collective b'nei Yisrael, where there are no named individuals after this. And gradually, what we're going to see is this deliberate effort on the part of Paro to chip away at this Israelite identity. And I would say it begins with, and I hope you can see where I'm pointing on this thing, but it begins with Vayakom melech chadash on the second line, al Mitzrayim, asher lo yada et Yosef. He does it, the new king emerges over Egypt who does not know Joseph. And of course, we know that this is impossible. It can't be that a king of Egypt would be unaware of the most basic annals of Egyptian history, such as this viceroy to the king who saved the country from economic ruin, right? But what we have here is an act of deliberate denial, deny the history of the Jews, right? And I think this works on several levels. For the Egyptians, they can rewrite history so that they can claim that the Jews have made no positive contribution to society, so we don't owe them anything. And I think even worse than that, in a sense, you kind of rob them of their worth, and you depict them as inherently unworthy. I think even potentially worse than that is that this Asher lo yada et Yosef, cutting them off from their origins, has a detrimental effect on the Jews themselves, that it cuts out their own sense of their uniqueness, of their origins, of their own worthiness. And it makes them hard to see themselves, as participants in that journey that began with Abraham. And I just to give a little editorial comment, this was something that came to mind when I was looking at this deliberate erasure of the Jewish past. I think it has a great deal of resonance today. In Israel, for years, there's been this active effort on the part of the Muslim Waqf. It's called, somebody put a term to it called temple denialism, where they basically illegally discarded in huge garbage heaps tons of priceless artifacts near the Temple Mount that linked ancient Jerusalem to the Jews, right? Basically saying you have no history with this land. And over 15 years, what Jews did here, what we did was this massive effort to sort through mountains of trash. And there were over 500,000 artifacts that were recovered this way. I think the equivalent, like right now, is this worldwide philosophical, political effort to depict Jews as having no connection to the land of Israel. Right? Jews are now being depicted as a colonialist nation, as if our history with this land begins in the 19th century rather than in biblical times, and rather, than existing in a very, very powerful way throughout the millennia. And I think, as you're very well aware, in the most progressive circles, the most extreme examples on campuses, Israel is on the wrong side of all social justice equations, right? We stole this land from the only indigenous people, who are the Palestinians. And from there, it's kind of a short journey to these outrageous claims of genocide, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, basically saying you have no history here, so you're just violent interlopers. And I think what's very sad about that is that in time, Jews often internalize the negation. We internalize the negation of our own history. And there's often a lot of societal pressure we don't want to bring on hostility from the surrounding culture. And it can lead to many of us adopting the narrative of the deniers. And this is summed up by the writer Dara Horn. She writes this, she pulls no punches, this woman: Jews are welcome so long as they undertake a kind of secular conversion by disavowing most of the things that actually made them Jewish. Whereas Jews once had to convert to Christianity, now they have to convert to anti-Zionism. Deborah Lipstadt, in her wonderful book, talks about something called a kind of Israel disloyalty oath. That young people on campuses have to sign, the equivalent of, it's the kind of affirmation that they're opposed to Israeli racism or Israeli fascism. I would argue that this is a modern version of Asher lo yada et Yosef, right? Cut off that connection. From there, getting back to the text, Paro moves ahead to a larger delegitimization. This is going to move from an attack on the Jewish soul, ultimately to an attack on Jewish lives. But look at some of these classic tropes of anti-Semitism that have been so resilient throughout the years. First of all, Vayomer el amo, hine am b'nei Yisrael rav ve'atzum mimenu. Literally, he said to his people, his nation, behold, the nation of the children of Israel is greater and mightier than we are. Paro is the first person to give this distinction, calling B'nai Yisrael, calling the Israelites a nation. But he does it because he wants to set them off aside or apart from Amo, from his nation, basically saying these Jews are a fifth column. They're not real Egyptians. They are these kind of threatening foreigners who live among us. And afterwards, this Rav V'atzum Mimenu, which literally is absurd, right? They can't be greater and mightier than we are. There are several ways that we can understand this. First, I think on the simplest level, we can say it's the big lie, which became very well known during the Shoah. If the more outrageous the claim, the more likely it is to be believed. So it feeds into a fear. Yes, of course there are more of them, but it feels that way, and so the racist inciter will claim that it is so. Another way to look at it, Rav ve'atzu mimenu, is they're too successful for us to handle. They are too great and too mighty for us to manage, right? Their success basically is not compatible with ours. And there's something very irrational about this kind of claim, because you would like to think that if you have a guest society that is very successful, that actually benefits everybody, right? It raises the gross national product of your country. But there is this sense that because they are other, that somehow that is a threat. And here I couldn't resist looking at this ADL poll that shows, right, this sentiment that Jews have too much power in the business world. That's a very popular thought in Eastern Europe. This notion that it can't be good for us. The real inhabitants of this land are somehow threatened by Jewish success. I wanted to just get back to this Rav ve'atzu mimenu, though. There's a third possible way to look at it. And one of the great things about teaching at the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies is that I have students who are very, very intelligent, but have never studied text before. And so they don't have any preconceived notions. So they looked at this, Rav ve'atzu mimenu, and they understood it in a very literal way. They are great and mighty mimenu, from us, right? This is another classic anti-Semitic trope. Basically, they gain strength by sapping our strength. This is right. This is an age-old claim of they're parasites. They drain our strength from us. Here is a recent election campaign in Poland in 2019, in a Polish national election. One party wanted to cancel Holocaust restitution, and their slogan was "Beware of parasites." And apparently this word in Polish contains, well, it does, for parasite contains the word Żyd. So they got that little message across in a very clever way. But getting back to Paro's speech, and this is actually not part of his speech, this is the text itself. Maybe the most damaging effect is hinted at the very beginning in the seemingly positive description of the proliferation of the Israelites. We have Uvnei Yisrael paru vayishritzu vayirbu. Now we recognize these verbs paru vayirbu from Genesis, that pruavu is a blessed multiplication of people. But vayishritzu is very dissonant. That means like the swamp creatures were created, like let them swarm. And I think what we have here is a very subtle shifting in perspective, where the Egyptians who are undergoing this racist rhetoric are beginning to look at the Hebrews as something less than human, as something disgusting, threatening. It's not a proliferation, it's an infestation. And I think, those of us who have seen Nazi propaganda films know what that looks like, the interspersing of Jews with rodents. To paint the Jew as something less than human. Beyond that, we have this. Paro says, Hava nitchakma lo. Come, let us deal cleverly with them, but literally it means with him. And if we had a lot of time, but this is your homework, go back to the text. It's really kind of fascinating how there are lots and lots of pronouns that are used there. And the only way you keep track of who are the Egyptians and who are the Israelites are referred to almost consistently as in the singular, and the Egyptians in the plural. And perhaps in this too, there is this kind of very subtle message that there is, we Egyptians represent the full spectrum of human possibility, diversity, right? We have different personalities, but Jews are this one collective mass of people indistinguishable from one another. Again, there's something less than totally human about them. One Jew is interchangeable with any other. And that, to get to modern times, Robert Bowers, who was the perpetrator of the horrific mass murder shooting in Pittsburgh, he said, every Jew is responsible for the meticulously planned genocide of the European race. They act as a unit, and every Jew plays his part to enslave the other races around it, right? One Jew, you know them all. And this, I would say, comes into direct conflict with the notion of lech lecha. It's all about individual distinction. And here is this effort to take away any sense of individuality at all. Okay, finally, in his incitement speech, we have, just following the speech, we have this, Vayasimu alav sarei misim, lema'an anoto besivlotam. And again, keeping track of the singulars and the plurals, they placed upon them, okay, upon him, the Egyptians, plural, placed upon the Hebrews, singular, these tax officers. Why did they do that? Liman anoto, and we can tell here again from the singular, in order to afflict him, meaning the Hebrews, besivlotam, with or in their burdens. Why did they place these tax officers? In order to afflict the Hebrews, basically because of the Egyptians' burdens. We are burdened, we are going to afflict you, and somehow that's going to make us feel that our burdens are lighter, right? And this is another classic strategy. In a word, this is scapegoating, right? If there's an economic crisis, Jews are targeted. People are looking for an address to let out all the rage that they've got, and terrible leaders often categorize on this. Of course, after his incitement speech, Paro moves toward action. He's going to start killing the babies. And that, I would say, is a very strong indication and message to the reader that words matter. Racist rhetoric leads directly to violent action, even murder. And I would just want to say that, listen up, presidents of Harvard, Penn, and MIT. Incitement, hate-filled words matter. While we're on the matter of university campuses, I want to just put in a personal note because Rabbanit Yael said I could. In my travels over the past, I would say more than 15 years, I went to many college campuses to teach in the Hillels there. And I was witnessing this steady stream of alarming, terrible anti-Israel displays on all of the college campuses. And each time I went running to the directors, the Hillel directors, the professionals, the student leaders, and I kept saying, look, what's going on here? Where's the strategy? What are you doing? And what I kept finding was, well, basically one of the following responses. One was denial. They don't really mean it. We really have great relationships. They're saying those words, but those words are not really so significant. It's kind of minimizing. They're just fringe anyway. Most of them are really our friends. And I think maybe most troubling of all was this kind of some degree of internalization of the messages. Basically, it wasn't sufficiently made clear that everything that those people were saying was wrong. I think there was some gradual absorption of those toxic messages, right? Which I think points to the success of what Deborah Lipstadt calls the disloyalty oath clause. At a certain point, it begins to just kind of take its toll on people. And I think this strategy of denying or minimizing the problem can be seen in another biblical story. Just after Moshe and Aharon, for the first time, they go to Paro and they say the famous words, right? Let my people go, shalach et ami. And Paro's response to this is to make the enslavement even more difficult. He says, now, as a reward for being so belligerent, now you're going to have to make your own straw. And the Jewish leaders react with denial, and I would say with tremendous weakness. Getting back to this vayishritzu mentality, vayavo shotrei bnei Israel, vayitzaku el Paro. They scream to Paro, and what I would have expected them to scream to Paro is, "Stop it! You're killing us!" But instead, look how they speak. Teven ein nitan la'avadecha. This is the most passive possible language that anyone could find. Straw is not given to your servants. Ulevenim omrim lanu asu. And bricks, they are telling us make. Who are they? Vehine, and this is really the crescendo. Vehine avadecha mukim. Your servants are being beaten. It's as if there's this invisible hand with an invisible stick, but there's nobody attached on the other end. There are no people doing it. right? This is happening to us. They don't have the sense of self-worth enough to step up and say, you are doing this to us and we demand that you stop it, right? There's this kind of shrinking in the face of this terrible bigotry. And if they cry out, it's to no one in particular. I would say that this pretty much becomes the story of the Israelites from throughout their before the redemption, even after the redemption from Egypt. It's going to be very hard for them to reclaim those names that started the book of Shemot, and to be able to get back onto the path of Lech Lecha. And just to give you a little teaser as to where I think it does happen, the few cases, fortunate cases where we do have a few outstanding named individuals who step up and get the Israelites back on track. Two of those characters are Shifra and Puah, these two midwives, where the text really goes out of its way in a passage that has no names to suddenly say, Asher Shem Ha'achat Shifra, V'Shem Hasheni Puah. These two women who are such strong personalities, such strong individuals, that they stand up to all conventional thought, even to the power of the ultimate power, the king of this empire, and it's their moral authority that actually beats him. They're able to do that. So we do have a few outstanding characters, but it's not. And the others, I would just say, if you're looking, the story of the daughters of Tzalafchad are another set of women who step up and are named again. These are people who really know what they're about. Okay, but anyway, we're talking about anti-Semitism, and I want to get to one final story, which is actually what I believe is the first story of anti-Semitism in the entire Bible. And I think this story actually foreshadows the enslavement in Egypt and hits on many of the same tropes. And this is the story of Isaac. This is very often overlooked. This is where I've done my anecdotal study of people listening to this passage when it's being read in shul and their eyes glaze over and they fall asleep, right? This story about Isaac and the land of the Plishtim and digging wells and undigging wells and who needs it. But it's actually a very, very interesting and very informative piece of text. Vayigdal ha'ish, he becomes great. Vayelech haloch v'gadel ad ki gadal me'od. And he's getting greater and greater, richer and more prosperous. And the response of the Plishtim is vayikanu oto Plishtim. Okay, this is kind of a telegraphing, a foreshadowing of what we're going to see in Egypt. They're, instead of embracing his success, they are envious of him. B'chol ha'be'erot asher chafru avdei aviv b'mei Avraham aviv sitmu plishtim vayimal'um afar. And all the wells that were dug in the time of Abraham his father, the Plishtim clogged them up, they sealed them up and filled them with dirt. Why are they doing that? Right? There's this sense there that, again, where they need to, Asher lo yada et Yosef, they want to destroy or disconnect a sense of Isaac and his own past, right? Attack his very identity, any contribution that he might have made to this host nation, fill in the wells with dirt, right? Just basically, you can't prove that your relationship goes back to your father Abraham, who had a relationship with us. Basically, a denial to his own ancestry and a denial to El Haaretz Asher Areka. You don't belong in this land, right? You don't have any wells. We don't recognize them. And here, if you really want to see shades of Egypt, Vayomer Avimelech El Yitzchak lech me'imanu ki atzamta mimenu me'od. Leave, and this is something that we see throughout Jewish history, expulsion, right? We don't want you here. Ki atzamta mimenu me'od. You have, you've become too mighty for us, right? This is directly foreshadowing. Hine am b'nei Yisrael rav ve'atzum mimenu. They are too great and too mighty, right? Again, we get this sense of you're too much for us to handle, or your greatness somehow makes us weaker. You're draining us. We don't. Your success is at counter purposes to our well-being. And Yitzchak's response, Vayashov Yitzchak vayachpor et be'erot hamayim, he just digs the wells right back up. And then the Plishtim fill them back in again. But he does it again, and he calls them Shemot. Here are these names. These, not only do I have a name, these wells have a name, and they are the names that my father Abraham called them. At this point, or soon after, Isaac understands that he cannot stay there. Vayal misham Beersheva. He decides to go back to his ancestral home. Beersheva, famously, is where Abraham settles after the Akedah. This is the place that the patriarchs go when they want to convene with God. And in fact, he builds an altar, calls in the name of God, and now comes the surprise, right? Basically, his reaction, I would say, what he doesn't do and what he does do. He does not try to please the Egyptians. He does not try to appease the Egyptians. He doesn't agree to deny his roots on any level. Instead, what does he do? He doubles down on his identity, on his history, and he says, these are my wells. These are their names. This land belonged to my father. This God is a God who appears to me, and I'm not going to stay in any place that is going to relate to me or treat me in this manner. So he leaves, builds the altar again, redoubles his connection, and the result, surprisingly, is that Avimelech goes running after him, right? After he reasserts his personal identity. Avimelech halach elav migrar. He comes after him, and Yitzchak looks back at him, and he says, Madua batem elai, vatem sineitem oti, you hated me, vatishalchuni meitchem, you sent me away. And their answer, Ra'o ra'inu ki haya Hashem imach. Very simply put, we saw that God was with you, right? Basically what they're saying is, you earned our respect, right? We treated you badly. You did not crumble under that negative gaze of ours. You stood taller as a result. And now we want to do business with you. And so they go running after him and they make a treaty, and there's a certain degree of happy ending to this story. Okay, so what does all this lead to? I want to move towards some coherent thoughts, which I hope I will have. Does any of this help us understand the causes of anti-Semitism or possible responses to it? And again, I want to reiterate my caveat at the beginning, at the very beginning. I do not have the answer to why we have anti-Semitism, but I do have a couple of thoughts, which I think are informed by the texts that we have explored. First of all, this man, who I understand was a little bit of an anti-Semite himself, but he wrote a book about anti-Semitism, and he says very simply, anti-Semitism, you can't explain it. It's a passion. It's beyond rationality and logic, right? We saw that, I think, in the text that we looked at, where there is hatred of Jews, even when that hatred comes at the expense of the well-being of the national interest, right? We hate you because we hate you. And I think that basically what we're getting is that the racist attitudes come first, and only after that come the tactics to help spread it. And I think all of this makes a very, very basic point, very important point. Anti-Semitism is not caused by any action of Jews, by any ideology of the Jews. It's caused by people who make the choice to be racists and bigots. That is the eternal truth here. Only anti-Semites can cause anti-Semitism, and only they can stop it. All right, so we're not going to really find causes, but I think we do find some common triggers among those who are disposed toward anti-Semitism. And I would say maybe at the heart of it, based on what we've studied here, it is just that uniqueness, that separateness, that essential separate identity of the Jew. Maybe people find offense at the fact that we define normal categorizations, right? We're separate in so many ways. Here, just a casual Wikipedia search. I was curious to see, how do you define Judaism? Judaism shares some of the characteristics of a nation, an ethnicity, a religion, and a culture, making the definition of who is a Jew vary slightly depending on whether a religious or national approach to identity is used. I sense that other groups of people are a little easier to define than this, right? What are we? And I think maybe it's just that category defying sense of lech lecha of being an ivri, always being that other, no matter where we are, that triggers people who are so inclined. Maybe it also makes it easier for those who are disposed to being bigots to blame us for all the ills of society. And as Rabbi Jonathan Sachs pointed out, we're usually blamed for whatever it is that is the most hated or most feared element in any particular society. If it's communism, then Jews are communists, etc. Today, in Western liberal circles, the most hated are those who are on the wrong side of the social justice equation. And I'm always amazed at how, there's so much talk about not looking at the world in binaries, but those lists on the progressive list often tends to be very binary, the good guys and the bad guys, social justice heroes and villains, and often Jews and certainly Israel finds itself on the wrong side, the bad side of that equation, because we are guilty of privilege. And it leads to this really outrageous conclusion, such as this one, where Jewish women, not just Israeli women, but Jewish women were banned from this feminist women's march because their Judaism was understood to be, by definition, an affront to social justice. Anyway, so what are we going to do? I think that, as we saw in Bnei Israel, in the Israelites responding to Paro's oppression, denial and apologetics don't really work. I was very taken by Yitzchak's response to it, which is to face it, to head on, to call it out, to say, you hate us, we object, we don't deserve it. I think, like Yitzchak, it's probably a good idea to know when to stay and when to leave. I think that probably has some relevance to places and institutions and even conversations. Is this a conversation that I can have? Will it lead to anything good? If not, I shouldn't be in it. But all of that is a defensive game, and that doesn't get to the core of the matter. Is there a way to address anti-Semitism in a strategic, proactive way? And I want to end with two possible strategies, both that we've seen in our biblical studies. One is, I would say, instructive in what not to do, and one has a positive message on how to move forward. Here's first the losing strategy. Getting back to that scene where Paro made the slavery harder, right? Because you demanded freedom, I'm going to make your slavery even worse. Look how the Jewish leaders, the Shotrim, how they respond to that. They wait for Moshe and Aaron coming out of Paro's palace. Vayifgeu et Moshe ve'et Aaron. Vayifgeu, it's almost like a violent accosting Moshe and Aaron. Vayomru alehem, Yereh Hashem alechem v'yishpot. Right? May the Lord, right, punish you or judge you. Asher hivashtem et reichenu be'enei Paro ve'enei avadav letet cherev bi'adam lahargenu. You have put a sword in their hands to kill us. Right? Basically accusing the leaders, the people who are trying to help them, trying to redeem them. You are responsible, right? You placed the sword in their hands. And I think when victims are sufficiently put down, if they have the wherewithal to blame anybody, they blame their own people. And to bring that to the present moment, before October 7th, I think Jews throughout the world, and certainly in Israel, were turning against each other at the most alarming rates. In the United States, the tropes that I heard whenever I talked to Jews about anti-Semitism were basically people on either side of the political aisle saying the other side is responsible for this, right? Those right-wing fascists are causing anti-Semitism, or you deluded Marxist left-wingers, you're causing anti-Semitism, you're the root cause of all this suffering. Right, if you just change your politics, if you would just keep a lower profile, then anti-Semitism wouldn't be here. In Israel, our infighting, I would say, hit really, by all standards, unprecedented levels, to the point that our enemies spoke openly about our weakness, right? We were weak as a people due to these internal fractures. And they determined on the basis of this, that this was the ideal time to strike. Here's something from Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, He said it in April of 2023. The Zionist regime had never faced such a terrible crisis like the one during its 75. You're talking about the protests and the responses. In 4 years, it has changed 4 prime ministers, and political coalitions have fallen apart before they've been completely formed. We said a few years ago that the Zionist regime would not see 25 years from then. They themselves are in a rush and want to leave sooner. Basically, you people are going to implode. Our job is just so easy. And I would say that one of the few glimmers of light since October 7th, in both in Israel and abroad, have turned this around in the most amazing, magnificent ways. Right in the US, I'm sure many of you were there at this incredible rally in Washington, right, where people and organizations, everybody got over themselves, over their whatever political differences they had that were so significant. Somehow they were able to stand under one tent, this beautifully stretched out tent that said there's room in here for everybody. And I think between Israel and the diaspora, there's been new levels of mutual support, mutual connection. And certainly within Israel, it's just incredible, the levels of unity. This, I found a beautiful quote from Walter Russell Mead in the Wall Street Journal. He looked at Israel after October 7th. Israel is more united. Its citizens are more determined to fight for their state. I spoke to Israelis across the political spectrum, from leaders of the pre-October 7th protests against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government to senior officials in the war cabinet. I heard only commitment to supporting the government through the war. And it really is incredible that this fighting spirit that was used in the past year to protest some difficult government policies immediately harnessed and redirected toward defending Israelis on October 7th and ever since. And really, I've been living in Israel, as I said, for over 40 years. I don't think I've ever seen this degree of solidarity, absolute support across the political spectrum, from far left to far right. Basically, support for the 2 pillars of the war, even though these 2 pillars contradict each other. Pillar 1 is an all-out military attack until Hamas is defeated, for as long as it takes, right? There's this sense that this is the most just war that Israel has fought in decades, and that we are fighting that war in as just a way as we possibly can. And what you might have thought was conflicting with this, but which is upheld just as strongly, is an absolute commitment to the urgent need to return our hostages who are living in unfathomable misery, with increased danger with every passing day. Anyway, I think what we have to do is learn from these narratives that turning on each other only makes things worse. Redemption moves further away, and it's going to be our great challenge after this, Be'ezrat Hashem, after this, to hold on to this sense of unity and really be resolved to not let it happen again. But I want to end with strategy number 2, okay? And that is this, what we saw with Yitzhak and Gerar. The best response is turning inward, basically rediscovering and reclaiming the Lech Lecha, the Ivri within us, to redig our wells. Right? What are those wells? Jewish literacy, Jewish tradition, Jewish values, Jewish texts, traditions, practices, proudly, unapologetically embracing Jewish national aspirations in the Jewish state of Israel. Right? And we Jews in Israel and abroad, we stand strong and proud. When we do that, we help each other tremendously. Right? I think here in Israel, our big task is to support Jews throughout the world with our incredible bravery, putting our lives, literally putting our lives on the line. And you over there, you are helping us in innumerable ways with such backup that we need in, as you know, unending host of issues. We started with Lech Lecha. I want to end with it. Basically, just a reminder, we are all children of Avraham HaIvri, the man of great and unique name, the descendants of a man who's named name. And I want to leave you with the bracha that we keep that name alive and strong to live up to our greatest Jewish values. And to me, when it comes down to it, the best way to respond to anti-Semites, in a word, is this: to be the proudest possible pro-Shemites. And here, I think this is a picture of your community. Do you know these people? I found them on your website.
Yes, that's Tammy. And I don't know the person in front, but maybe someone else here does.
You guys, and this is the Pardes Beit Midrash, and I think to be a pro-Shemite means to be proactive in embracing all this beauty that we have, and that's all I have to say. Any questions?
I'm so sorry I have to jump off. That was fantastic, Judy, as always. Thank you so much, and wishing you safety and inspiration. Thank you so much.
See you.
And lots of rays of Hanukkah light.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Judy. That was such a powerful weaving of narratives, as you always do so beautifully. If anyone has a question or two, we have a few more minutes. Otherwise, we'll wish everyone a happy last day of Hanukkah. I think there's a lot to take in. We've got to let it settle before we ask our questions.
Okay. Very good. Okay,
We're getting
everybody.
applause over here from Alan Bursting. Can you see that? That was cute. Wonderful. Well, have a wonderful end of your day. And I hope everyone will keep your eyes out. Starting in January, we will have some use of this time and space, maybe not exactly Torah from Israel, but drawing on the wisdom that we can from the people who live there. Thank you so much, Judy, for concluding a wonderful series for us on such a high note.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Amaya.